Guys, another team that couldn't keep up with an explosive offense, the LSU Tigers. Let's move over to the game that just finished, a little rapid reaction. Florida State wins 45-24. Um, Jordan Travis put on a clinic in the second half, especially. The Noles score 31 unanswered out of the break after trailing 17-14 at half. This was a beautifully chaotic game. It was funny. I texted you guys at any one time on Twitter, you could open up the feed and there would be folks both praising how fun this game was and complaining about how sloppy it was. There were folks saying FSU and LSU won't beat insert Power 5 team that's next on their schedule. There were folks saying Florida State or LSU, depending on who had just scored, was a shoo-in for the playoff. It was an incredible convergence of takes, events. This was a really fun game until about halfway through the third quarter. Really, I guess more towards the beginning of the fourth quarter when the Noles started to pull away. Garrett, let's start with you. What stood out to you about this game? A couple of guys had really big stat sheets. We'll get into that, but just overall, kind of give me your temperature on both of these teams.
Well, I think today the best team won. I think that's what happened. I think Florida State was the better team. I think there was a lot of stuff to go wrong with LSU, and I felt like both teams kind of matched intensity early on. I felt like that's kind of what happened in the first half. Was both teams were there, both teams were gunning, making great plays. I remember there was the fumble recovery, and Florida State's going crazy, and then the next play it seemed like interception going back the other way, and it just felt like one half of the stadium's roaring, then the other half's roaring, and there we go. And so it felt really fun. To me, I thought the first half was fun. I thought that was a lot of fun watching teams make good plays on defense and come up with big stops. But as the game wore on, it just kind of felt like Florida State was able to put their will on LSU. It seemed like the runs were getting a little longer, that the holes were opening up a little quicker, that there's a little bit more yards after catch on the receivers' ends. And it just seemed like over time, things just got a little bit better and a little bit better for Florida State. And LSU kind of almost rolled over. I know they had that long touchdown at the very end, but it almost felt irrelevant at that point. It almost seemed like the Florida State guy was like, let them walk it in. Let's just get the ball back and, run the clock out. So, I mean, hats off to Florida State. They played a fantastic game. I feel really good about putting them at my number 2 after that performance because it's not to say that I don't think LSU is a good team, but when you miss a couple of players and you don't have a proven track record defending the run, it makes everything else harder on defense, right? It doesn't matter if you got a good pass defense. Doesn't matter if your DBs are supposed to be talented. Doesn't matter if your linebackers are crazy fast like Harold Perkins. Doesn't matter. When you can't stop the run up front, when you cannot win on the line of scrimmage, you're not going to win a whole lot of games, and especially not against that elite talent at the top end of the college football world.
Yeah,
Trey,
go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I'm gonna cue you up here. The battle in the trenches was ugly all night long. Both defensive lines had more success than offensive lines, but the pass rush for Florida State was a lot more consistent, certainly in big moments, right? And a big part of that was Harold Perkins was not rushing off the edge as many times as it felt like he should have been. And we talked about this in the preview. LSU has him playing stand-up linebacker, playing in the middle of the field where I think Kirk Herbstreit made the comment. LSU is taking a guy who is all world rushing the passer, and they're putting him back in coverage where he's simply average. There were a number of points where I kind of scratched my head at what LSU was doing, but the deployment of Harold Perkins as the best weapon on the field was chief among them.
Absolutely, especially when you already knew going in that you're missing your best defensive lineman in Mason Smith, right? And we talked about how that affects the running game, but Mason Smith is no slouch in putting pressure on the quarterback as well. So LSU was still able to generate some pressure, and they were able to get to Jordan Travis a little bit, but Harold Perkins had 5 tackles, 2 solo tackles in this game. You're telling me you want your best player to impact 5 plays? Like, I know that that's not all on the scheme. That's definitely on Perkins as well. And he would tell you that he should have had more, but you got to put your best players in the best position to make plays. And one of the knocks on Brian Kelly throughout his whole coaching career at Notre Dame was just a lack of innovation, right? It was the same offense every year. It was the same scheme. It was bully ball. It was throw to the tight end. It was run the ball for 3 yards in a cloud of dust a lot of times, and eventually just outlast teams. And when you're out athleted, like you were against Florida State tonight in a lot of positions, Florida State just made a lot more big plays, and it's a lot easier to score in bunches when you can make big chunk plays and when you can, exploit matchups that you think that you can take advantage of. And LSU did not do that tonight. They were totally fine with the vanilla play calling. They were totally fine with their limited ability on offense. I think the better quarterback in Jordan Travis, this was 2 great college quarterbacks, and Jordan Travis is the better quarterback, right? He has the ability to throw downfield accurately. We just haven't seen that from Jaden Daniels, and it really limits the offense for LSU. And that kind of is the microcosm of the whole team. They were not innovative on defense either. They got pressure a little bit, but the blitz packages weren't really left a lot to be desired, and left the chess pieces are there. I'm just not convinced that they're being played in the right way.
LSU couldn't move the ball on the ground. Jaden Daniels was the leading rusher, 15 carries for 64 yards. Guys, they talked about Noah Cain being a difference maker, transferring in from Penn State. 4 carries for 4 yards. He had a short yardage touchdown, but other than that, did not impact this football game. The LSU offensive line really struggled. The Florida State offensive line really struggled as well. But as you mentioned, Trey, it was clear who the better quarterback was. And Jordan Travis had his struggles in this game. Towards the end of the first half, that second quarter, when all of a sudden it felt like LSU might be able to pull away, he was struggling to keep his eyes downfield. He almost threw a terrible pick on his own 10-yard line. And so Travis did not play a perfect game, but in the end, he was able to throw the ball more accurately down the field. Keon Coleman goes off, 9 catches, 122 yards, 3 touchdowns. He bullied Deuce Chestnut, the Syracuse transfer, all night long. This was a fun game to watch for those of us that were saying, now wait till you see Keon Coleman in a real offense. And tonight was that night. To the point of Jaden Daniels struggling at times, it's not like he had a bad night. 345 yards, a touchdown, a pick. He had some drops. Both teams really struggled with drops. But for LSU, for me, where they lost this game, where they lost the momentum, it was 1 drops. They had several key chances to run away and hide with this game early. And that even goes to the very start of the game. They were 0 for 3 on 4th down. 2 of those 4th down attempts were within the first, 8 minutes of the first quarter inside the red zone.
Well, and they had first and goal at the 1-yard line.
At the 1.
You couldn't punch it in.
Yeah. So some seriously missed opportunities for the Tigers. I want to ask you guys, if LSU is able to either punch, maybe first and goal from the 1, Noah Cain's able to get into the end zone. Maybe they get a field goal in that second drive instead of wasting that away. 2, was this an area where LSU could have taken the air out of the ball had they gotten a couple of scores early, or do you think Florida State's offense was going to do what it was going to do?
They could have, I guess, but when you look at just how the game played out and what we know about the 2 coaching staffs, one coaching staff made adjustments and had a fantastic second half, and the other one didn't make any adjustments and was just happy with doing the exact same things as they were in the first half. So, I mean, it's easy to say, yeah, if they punch that in or they get something happens here, that's going to happen in any game. I don't know that it would have changed the game all that much, to be quite honest. I mean, it would have changed the momentum at the beginning, but Florida State did not come out guns a-blazing. I know they scored on their first drive right after they got that huge goal line stand, but overall, they started slow in the game overall. Only 14 points in the first half. They made a ton of adjustments in the second half. I'm thinking about the 2-back sets that they got on the field to kind of counteract the defensive line pressure that LSU was getting. And once Florida State started making adjustments, LSU just really had no answer for them. So I don't know that would have changed the game overall, personally.
Yeah, I mean, Florida State won this game by 3 touchdowns. You'd score 1 more on the front end. That's nice. Maybe you could take the air out of it. Maybe it changes it. But I think when you have the experience that Travis brings with them and you have the coaching staff that's familiar with them, and especially the leadership on defense, too, with as many pieces as they bring back on defense, that's not going to sway a defense just because they get down early or give up a couple of scores early. That doesn't happen when you have guys on that defense who can step up and be the voice and say, hey guys, like we need to step it up, right? This ain't getting it done. This ain't going to cut it. We need to go get the ball back to our offense, let them do it. That's not going to happen when you're playing those kinds of teams, right? And so I think this would have been the result anyways. Like I said, I think the better team won anyways. Maybe LSU makes it more competitive if they jump out to a bigger lead, but they scored 31 unanswered coming out of halftime. Like that's not a fluke. That's not like nothing happened, right? That's a pretty massive adjustment at halftime that, LSU simply didn't have an answer for. And it felt like the moment got too big for them and the moment seemed just fine for Florida State. And maybe that shows a difference in experience or a difference in leadership. I don't know what it is, but, at the end of the day, Florida State did what they needed to do. LSU just didn't.
Tell you what, Florida State's receiving core is scary. Between Keon Coleman, you have Johnny Wilson, who struggled with some drops tonight, no doubt, but when he was able to turn it on, 7 catches, 104 yards, a long of 22 yards. You got Jaheim Bell, the South Carolina tight end transfer, who didn't do much for the vast majority of the game, but had 2 catches late, a touchdown. I believe the last Florida State touchdown was thrown to Jaheim Bell. And then you've got Lawrence Toafili, who is, a running back by trade, but boy, he's really good at coming out of the backfield, running those halfback angle routes and getting open over the middle of the field, running a wheel route as well. There's so many weapons for Jordan Travis to hit and execute with. And I think Florida State is going to be a team to watch every single week, appointment viewing the rest of the season. Before we move up the coast to the Queen City, just a quick hitter from each of you. Garrett, let's start with you. What constitutes success for Brian Kelly and LSU the rest of this year?
I think you got to get back to Atlanta. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I think getting back to Atlanta, playing in the championship game, beating Alabama, taking care of business with the rest of the SEC West, not losing that late game to A&M at the end of the year, even if you have it wrapped up. That's what looks like success. Even if they don't win it, I mean, obviously you would prefer to win the SEC, prefer to win your conference, get to the playoff. But even if you don't win it, go back to the championship game, have another chance there, and show your fans that you haven't, completely fallen apart just because of an early season, getting smacked in the face, right? You got to get back on the ball, got to get back to playing good on the offensive line. But if you can do that, go win some games and show your fans that it's not all doom and gloom. You can get back from this.
Yeah, we said before this game, before in our preview, we said that neither one of these teams is going to be eliminated from the playoff contention with a loss here. We saw LSU lose to Florida State last year and still get to Atlanta. So that's ultimately the goal. And I'm with you, Garrett. I think that for that fan base, you have to make it to Atlanta for it to be a successful season. At the bare minimum, I don't even think they were happy with making it to Atlanta last year. They kind of gave him a pass since it was year one, and they were excited to get there because it was year one. But, if you read the tea leaves of that fan base, I don't think that they were necessarily happy with the outcome down the stretch of that season last year. So there's a lot of questions being asked in Baton Rouge right now. TigerDroppings.com, the server has crashed, I'm seeing on Twitter. So the seat's starting to get warm, fellas. That you got to win, and you got to win quick in Baton Rouge to appease that fan base. And back-to-back losses to Florida State, and this one just not even being competitive in the second half is not going to endear yourself to that family.
I'm thrilled I changed my pick after all offseason saying I feel like the ball bounces LSU's way. It didn't bounce. It didn't go Florida State's way for the reasons that I kind of outlined. The passing attack just bludgeoned LSU's secondary into compliance, which, to be fair, was one thing that we highlighted, right? As a concern for LSU. You only had one starter back. The rest of the guys were transfers or new faces, and they looked like they need some seasoning for sure. So, season's not over for LSU, but my goodness, it is a unforeseen roadblock that I don't think a lot of LSU fans were counting on. I think a lot of Cajuns were expecting to take care of business tonight, and it was the exact opposite.
Gracious. Yep.